Hello, and welcome to the 15-minute wrap-up for Friday, 01/21/22. I'm a little bit late at getting to this, but basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. And again, you can see here what I see. I'm going to change it over to student view in a little bit. Okay. And basically, we went through our first week today. I will show you the syllabus. So if you go on to week 1, you can take a look at this structure right here, and you can see the syllabus for the class. And then the syllabus in the class, and I went over this in my last 15-minute session. We talked about who the instructors are, and when we kind of meet, talked a little bit about the rules and regulations of the class and what you need to do. We also talked about grading in this class. The lecture portion of the class is worth roughly about 60%. The laboratory is worth 40%. So this week we were going over chapter 1, evolution. We were introducing ourselves and kind of everything else like this. This class, for the most part, is meant to be kind of an in-person synchronous class. But again, I want to try and make things up for you. So if you missed a class, please see the 15-minute wrap-up for what you did, and you may want to watch the 15-minute wrap-up anyways. For next week, we are going to be covering chapters 22, 23, 24, and 25. I know that's a lot, but please make sure that you read it before you go or before you are here. If we go back, I will always publish roughly about like on that Sunday. I will publish the lecture materials for the chapter. I'm still working on next week's chapter. Here is Wednesday's 15-minute wrap-up that I had for you there. And then on Fridays, this 15-minute wrap-up will go right here. But a couple of things that I want you to do is basically, if we look at here in activity, we have a Flipgrid job. I want you to apply for a biotechnology job in Flipgrid. I set up the scenario in here, but if we click on this should show you a Flipgrid, and it goes, so basically you want to give me a 3-minute video where you introduce yourselves, give me your name, who you are, explain how you can do the activities that I say up before of what a biologist does, explain why this is the perfect job for you, and what your next job, career, or training is going to be. And I know all of you don't necessarily want to be biologists. You may want to be a respiratory therapist. You may want to be a physical therapist, etc. This training and may help you with that. So tell us a little bit about why somebody would want to hire you for that. And the reason why I'm doing that is I want to try and get to know you a little bit. I will get to know you in laboratory, but this is just another way. The other thing that I wanted to do is that for the most part, we have some chapters in here, and I'm going to be doing some lecturing, but I also want to have some group activities and activities in the classroom where you do stuff. And so this week, it's going to be in person doing stuff, but I do realize that not everyone can be there at the same time and stuff like that. So if you miss an activity, I'll kind of always allow you to kind of do it for a little bit. I do want them done on Friday so that I can take a look at and grade them on Saturday and Sunday. For this first one, about half the class, it's Saturday night when it's due, and about half the class haven't done this assignment yet. I don't want to start you guys out by giving you a 0 on your first assignment. And so I'm going to leave this open until 5 o'clock tomorrow. That way I can look at it before we have the lecture on Monday, and we could do it. So if we click on this, basically it's a discussion, and we will be doing these as groups. But what I want to do is, basically there's some concepts that we're covering chapter 1 that are pretty important, and we'll cover them in more detail, but I want to talk about them a little bit right now. So those 4 concepts that we have. And so concept number 1, you want to take your favorite living thing and give me 3 reasons why we as biologists consider it alive. So go ahead and look in your textbook. And your textbook gives you some properties of life, including order, energy, processing, evolutionary adaptation. Please don't make up your own or say things like metabolism, because that's not what we are using in a book, and that's not the language that we're using in the book. On all these things, what I want you to do is to give me those reasons. That would be a good one. And then what you want to do is explain in detail what each of those reasons is. And, if you look at your structure of what you're going to do, you're probably going to have an introductory paragraph with the 3 reasons. And then for each of those reasons, you're going to give me a paragraph of why you think that is the case. Okay. You could also do a scientific method. And then how can a scientific method be used to learn something? Give an example of the scientific method and make sure that you label clearly all the parts of the method and explain the step that one goes through, this is spelled wrong, to do this learning. Okay, so don't just say the scientific method is observation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I want you to use it. Show me how it's done. Don't just give me that explanation. Concept number 3, energy flow and chemical cycling. And so when we look at ecosystems, we think that energy flows through an ecosystem, and basically chemicals or matter is recycled in the system. What you want to do is you want to explain what a producer and a consumer in an ecosystem are, give those definitions, and then you want to give me a figure or a description of how energy flows and chemicals are recycled through the system. And explain that, give me a little bit more explanation of that. The third one is kind of one of the concepts that we look in this book is what we call structure function. And there's a heavy correlation in structure function for this. And I want you to give me 2 instances where basically the form and the function match. Okay. You will look this up, look it up in your textbook, and they give some examples in 1.3 in your text. And so if so pick one of those and write about that. And so that gives me a really good idea of kind of that you're reading the information. So rather than me just lecturing and saying, here, look at this material, what I'll try and do is try and do a quick summary in the beginning of the week, and then we will have some type of activities. You won't be able to do it all, but what you're going to do is you're going to do an activity, and I will try and give you as much feedback as I can on it. All right, so let's go back a little bit. Or so if I go back to home here, basically, hopefully you guys have done the labs, the observation labs and the lab safety. We will in roughly about a week and a half be having what I call a validation quiz. How are you doing? Are you actually reading stuff? And so on chapter number 1, I gave you some basic themes to kind of go over, and this is the information that you're going to need to know about that. I will talk about the validations a little bit later, but again, the questions like that I gave you on that Friday discussion are kind of what you're going to have as a validation. So what we're going to do as a validation, I'm going to give you a scenario, and you got to talk to me about that scenario. And then I will grade that scenario for your ability to be able to answer that. And again, we got to be on campus. So these are kind of in-person tests that we do. All right. So that's it for about that. So what I can do right now is I can go a little bit over the chapter number 1, the introduction. And so here's my syllabus of kind of what I wanted to do today. And then I did flip grids, I did that validations. And so review on examination. And so let's flip on the slideshow. And we kind of did this already in chapter number 1. Basically, this is the book in kind of one chapter of what we are going to do. And basically in the book, what we're talking about is what is biology. And biology is a lot of kind of rules and regulations and jargon and things like that. And I do want you to know them. But what I want you to do is I want you to use them in purpose, use them with purpose. And so I'm going to, again, to assess you on how much of this biology that I will give you certain scenarios and I will ask you certain questions. And then you're going to tell me kind of what you know about those questions. Some things will be relatively easy, like what's the definition of biology? And you're going to say the scientific study of life or something to that effect. That's pretty easy. But again, what I want to do is look at these higher orders of learning of are you getting kind of how things kind of go together and that. And then, kind of the first one that we're looking at is you do need to be able to give me the characteristics of life. These are the terms that I want you to know. Life is ordered. Life is energy processing. Life is growth and development. Life is response to the environment. Life is evolutionary adaptation. Life is regulation. Life is reproduction. And again, you guys need to know the difference between what evolutionary adaptation is basically populations changing over time, and regulation, which is an individual changing its biochemistry over time. And then if you go ahead and look at your book, you can look at that a little bit more. Again, there are some themes that we have to biology, and that is organization. Life is organized. If we look at from your physics class, you may know that the universe is going towards entropy disorder. And what we're seeing is life is where we're able to bring this kind of order together. That requires information and handling information, and we'll understand that a little bit. Life is dealing with energy and matter in ecosystems. Life is interaction with organisms, with populations, with communities, with ecosystems. And lastly, what we see is the big theme on this is that evolution is change, not necessarily change for better, is that change happens. And when you make a copy of something, it's really hard to make an exact copy of something. And we'll go through that a little bit more. Life does have different levels, and we did talk about this, the biosphere, ecosystems, communities. So if we go the other way, basically what we're going to be looking at is we may look at some tissues in this class. And so a number of tissues come together to make an organ, a number of organs come together to make an organ system, a number of organ systems come together to make an individual, an individuals come together to make a population, a number of populations come together to give us a community, a number of communities come together to give us ecosystems. All of our ecosystem together give us this biosphere. Basically, the only place that we know that we have a life is basically the Earth. But again, it used to be, we looked at the Earth and said, oh, life has to have water, life has to have this distance from the sun and stuff like that. And what we're finding out now in this definition of life that we have, we can dig some really deep holes on this planet and there's stuff alive down there. And actually, if you look at the sum mass of it, there's more stuff alive buried underneath the Earth than there is on top of the Earth. It's just such a large area. And we'll cover that a little bit, and we'll definitely kind of look at that and kind of go through here. Here's some really good pictures. You can read about this in your text. We're not going to worry about the molecules and everything else like that. Another concept that we have on here is this thing that we call emergent properties. And emergent properties are things that result from the arrangement and interaction of parts in the system. And so for a long time in biology and in science in general, we were kind of using kind of a reductive approach. That is, we would dissect everything up into its little parts. You know, again, a body has 11 organ systems. These organ systems are made up of these special tissues in order to give it its properties. But what we're seeing is that we've kind of taken this stuff and put it together, and we couldn't make stuff, couldn't make things become alive. And this emergent property, life is this kind of emergent property that we have all here. And basically a lot of this is looking at what we call systems biology. And that, you know, it's really something that we don't know about and that we can learn more about. And we talked about the systems biology in here. And then basically, when we look at life, there's two big types of life. And we'll talk about this next week, what we call the 3 domains of life that we have. And then there's some significant difference on the cellular level. DNA is a common universal seam. It's one of the information molecules that we have. Genes are basically the units of inheritance. An organism that we have goes through a development. You know, you change kind of, each individual will kind of change over their lifespan that we look. DNA, I'm going to leave that for biology 230, which is next. And we also look at gene expression and kind of what's going on there. And so there's a genetic analysis on it. We do need to know this genomics and proteomics because, again, this is actually helping us. This is kind of one of those things in laboratory. You guys may have worked on these things that we call dichotomous keys, and they're a little bit hard to kind of work with. And by using genetic analysis, we can identify organisms that are out there. We can actually take air samples and figure out what organisms are in an area. We can take water samples and we can figure out what organisms are in an area. And this is an area that we call bioinformatics, which is basically sometimes we generate so much information that we need computers in order to take care of those. Again, when we look at an ecosystem, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, but in an ecosystem, you have an input, which is energy, and you have an output, which can be heat, which is lost in the environment. We also do chemical cycling. So the carbon that's in a system, the carbon that's in this planet is continuously being kind of recycled, and we'll talk about that. And then basically that's about it. You know, we will look at kind of the interactions and interactions of what we go on in life. I got like 5 seconds left, and basically that's about it. Next week, we're going to talk about kind of what life is, and you guys are going to get a little bit better of understanding of how life came about and what it is. All right, that has been my 15-minute wrap up for Friday, January 21st, 2020. As always, it's wonderful to hear from you. Give me an email if you have a question or anything like that, and I will respond to it. So thank you very much and have a great weekend.